Hello and welcome to the second episode ever of Two Hoegs Are Better Than One, which I was calling last week THABTO, but my brother, Ever the Snide commenter, said, hey, TH make a sound together, so maybe it should be THABTO. Isn't that what you told me, Tom?
Snide? That seems cruel. I think you could pick a slightly less aggressive word.
Okay, my very clever, obviously more intelligent than me brother suggested that we combine the TH sounds to make a THABTO word. Is that right?
You have to express to people that I'm more intelligent if they listen to last week's show.
Ah, I see. I got it. But yes, if you haven't caught the first episode yet, this is Two Hoegs Are Better Than One. I'm Richard Hoeg, the managing partner of the Hoeg Law business law firm of Northville, Michigan, who regularly does talk about the video game industry and information technology in his primary series on this channel, which is called Virtual Legality, where we talk about business and law. My brother, however, is a game developer. He's worked on franchises like Ratchet & Clank and Destiny and Call of Duty, and he currently works at High Moon Studios out in California, which is a subsidiary of Activision. So, Tom, you want to give your now weekly disclaimers for that Activision role?
Yeah, so I work for High Moon Studios, who's owned by Activision. So I'm an Activision employee, and any opinions I express during the podcast are mine alone and not Activision's. I think that covers me.
That's right. It's Two Hoegs Are Better Than One. It's not Rick Hoeg and Activision are better than one. These are not Activision's thoughts, which I think will become apparent as you hear more and more from my brother. But yeah, thank you for joining me again on this show. I think as an introduction this week, one of the things I told you not to do was to look at the comments to our videos or our podcasts, but you went ahead and did that, didn't you, Tom?
You told me after the fact. I knew that I shouldn't look at them as a person who has done things on the internet.
That's right.
But I was actually happily surprised that the audience for this seems to be relatively supportive and encouraging and theoretically seems to like the content. So that's all great. I didn't see any attacks when I looked. I don't know if that's changed.
No, we've got some great comments. We've got Two Hoegs Are Great. Love the video, Hoeg. We've got some people that are kind of disparaging me and saying how much better it is now that Tom's involved, which, you know, kind of a backhanded compliment. But yeah, I think that goes to really speak actually more than for us than to the actual people that watch Virtual Legality and follow the Hoeg Law YouTube channel. You guys are great. And if you want to comment to us and tell us about some things that we should be talking about or that you'd like to hear Tom and I discuss, we obviously do read these from time to time. I'll try to shield Tom from anything that's a personal attack and things like that. And if this does get more popular, Tom, I have to warn you, the really popular Virtual Legality episodes, the ones that hit like the Reddit boards and things like that, we get a more colorful commentator than the regular viewers.
Yeah, I expect that. Like I said, I've been on the internet. I've published video games under my own banner, so like I know what that's like.
Sure.
You gotta just take it with as much salt as you find necessary.
Well, occasionally people comment on my voice or on my speaking mannerisms. That's always enjoyable. But so look out for those. Otherwise, I think it was a good success. I think the pilot episode was enjoyed by more folks than I would have guessed. And so I'm really happy to see that. And I think we're going to continue doing this whenever we have windows to talk about things. So thank you to everybody who watched the first episode or listened to it. And thank you for being genteel with your comments. We've got some good notes as well to add. I know a number of people want to try to do this live. Tom, how many times would you say we had a technical fault last week that we wound up covering up in editing? 3 or 4?
Yes, it was probably like a half dozen
right.
Total. We have made some changes to our Discord setup, so hopefully it'll go better this week.
That's right. And, you wound up sounding like you were Dodger Stadium for the second half of that video, so maybe that won't happen this time.
Echo.
And in terms of other logistical things, I'm actually in the middle of a gigantic thunderstorm that has turned day to night here. So if you get anything on my end, it's probably my fault. Or if we lose power entirely, chances are you won't actually see the episode because it won't exist. So forget that part. But otherwise, anything else you want to add before we just launch into talking about video games and whatnot?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, I think last week we started a kind of segment here that was talking about what we're currently playing. And so I think we're going to do that again this week. This was not a gigantic week for the releases of video games, but there were a couple of hidden gems and things that I had only really found out about recently or didn't know about at all really until I hit the button to purchase the game. And I always find that to be exciting. We've talked about it a little bit before, Tom, but expectation goes a long way as to how a game is received by you, right?
Yeah, I like I've said before, I think that how you actually feel about a lot of different stuff, but games are no exception, is the difference between kind of what you expected to feel and what you actually felt. So if you expected it to be awesome and it was good, you're kind of disappointed. And if you expected it to be good and it was awesome, you're kind of happily surprised. I was a person who hyped a lot of games in his youth.
He was.
Got really excited for games and got burned a lot when they just didn't live up to the expectations that I had. So I mostly don't hype, don't prep. I barely watch sort of like the preview stuff because I want to kind of leave my expectations at, I guess, moderate. Like I know a little bit, but I don't watch things too closely. That changed a little bit this year.
I was going to bring this up.
Yeah, I got really hyped for Anthem. I'm a big Destiny player. I like BioWare or liked BioWare.
Ooh.
In the past, well, Anthem was not the thing that changed that exactly. I think that BioWare had been going sort of downhill for me for a while, probably since Dragon Age Origins. And
weren't there Mass Effects after that?
There might have been, and maybe that's not entirely fair. I think Mass Effect, Mass Effect as a series is problematic. I think I might be weird and potentially that I'm the person who likes the first one the best.
Oh no, I like the first one the best. Absolutely.
Okay. I think, and some of that's not fair because there's so much world exposition there that I think is so great that you can't do again exactly. Like you can introduce little bits on top of that in the sequels, but you can't be like you're discovering this whole universe that hasn't been explained before.
That's right. There's a novelty in terms of getting introduced to world building that is in Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect. And then once you're kind of building on the shoulders of giants, you can't get that novel feeling back. They tried with Anthem.
Yeah, no, you really can't. And I thought that the worlds of Mass Effect and Dragon Age were just so interestingly thought through of any of the sort of I don't know what the right word is, RPGs that I play through.
Yeah, until you completely ruined Dragon Age for me. Do you remember how you ruined Dragon Age for me?
How did I ruin Dragon Age for you?
So let me set the stage here, and you'll remember this as I tell this story. If you are familiar with the Dragon Age saga, the story, you know that the continent that it takes place on is called THABTO, which is a really cool fantasy name. It's like THABTO. Yeah, we're going to save THABTO. And I really enjoyed Dragon Age Origins, and I was really immersed in the world, really enjoyed the lore that BioWare had put out there. Tom, what did you tell me about the name of their continent?
So I don't remember where I heard this, but it sounds true. It might have been from it might have been from someone who worked on it. But basically THABTO. So whenever you're working on a game and you're kind of figuring out the narrative or the levels or whatever, you don't have the actual names figured out, and they're going to change a lot. So THABTO actually stands for the Dragon Age scenario. And so all over their documentation and all over their narrative, it was just referred to as THABTO. And they were going to be like, we'll figure out what it's called. If it's, Faerun or what is Elder Scrolls World called? Cyrodiil?
Well, that's one of them. I don't know. I don't know what the planet name is called. But back to talking about BioWare.
And anyway, so it's one of those things that it you can say it obviously, and I think that's part of the reason they chose it as the acronym. Is it's like it's not FRTP or something. It's something that you can pronounce, and so eventually it's one of those things that just they got comfortable with. And they're like, that actually sounds like a fantasy place.
It does. It totally worked for me, and then you just unceremoniously ruined it. But that's all right. That's what brothers do. And if this is your first episode of Two Hoegs Are Better Than One, as you probably noted, this is what I have described as a freewheeling, somewhat meandering podcast/video series where we talk like brothers and kind of wind up going off into various different topics. As you can see, we started out talking about things that Tom was hyped about, and we wound up talking about what the Dragon Age scenario means in Dragon Age. But back to
that's right.
Yeah, back to the enfeebling of BioWare. Yeah.
Yes. So Anthem, yes, Anthem I got really hyped for. I watched a lot of videos and stuff as it was coming out, tried to really sort of be excited about it, tried to participate. So I ended up getting Origin Premier. I don't actually own Anthem. I just got the subscription to EA.
The fancy one, the premium
one.
Yeah,
the fancy one that got me the early weekend access, which was a total just abomination.
And you can catch my thoughts on that early access on Virtual Legality, where we talk about the messaging problems that BioWare had, even kind of responding to its audience having the difficulties that they were having.
Right. And then the second week was a little better. And then when it came out, I think they fixed most of the problems that they had in the early access, the technical issues. The game itself has, design problems, and those are much harder to fix after the fact.
Right, and they're trying to do it right now.
I was really excited for it. I think it does some stuff that's interesting, but ultimately it just wasn't for me, and I haven't played it, and most of my friends that I know who play it haven't played it in months.
Right, it's been a while. It's been a while. But the point of this story was that you are cursed, and that if anybody hears you getting excited about a video game on Two Hoegs Are Better Than One, they should immediately run far away screaming. Because
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. Everything that you've been excited for that I can remember, maybe with some exception, if you can come up with one, that's great, has turned out to be disappointing. And not just disappointing for you, but generally disappointing for the world at large.
That's probably true. Certainly anything that's crossed over to like mega hype level, where I'm like really just looking at all the previews and checking out everything.
Yep.
The stuff that kind of gets on my radar and I'm looking forward to, but I keep at arm's length, tends to go well. But yeah, the stuff that I get really into, and maybe that's just a commentary on how high my expectations get when I'm hyping.
I actually have a theory on this. I have a theory on this, which is you've been game developing for a long time. You've been a game player for a longer time. And so to really get you excited about something, it has to be something that looks at least remotely novel. And so, like, you look at Anthem, and it's something brand new for BioWare. It's got flying. It looks odd. It had that really good E3 showing a couple years ago. And that's the kind of medley that gets you excited. But it also is the kind of thing that is probably the highest risk type of design. It's not really kind of built on something that already exists. Anthem kind of was, but as you could see from playing it, it went off in its own direction. And so you wind up hyping up these things because they're new, because they sound exciting. You have a game design brain, and you can think of all the ways that it could work. And when it doesn't, it's more disappointing to you than anybody else.
Yeah, that's accurate. I think that my game design brain...
Yep, that's what I said.
Does meander or wander off or make assumptions that I don't know if everyone does. So sometimes I've seen games or heard like light descriptions, and I'll talk to someone and I'll be like, oh, I think they're doing this, and I think they're doing this. And people are like, why do you think that? They're like, oh, I guess I just designed that portion of the game based on the, these two tidbits that they...
a preview from IGN and a short clip in a video. This is good. Maybe next week you can tell me exactly how Death Stranding plays and what it means.
I think I'm going to screw up this guy's name. Norman Reeves?
Reedus, I believe.
Reedus. Norman Reedus, just standing on a beach. The whole game.
Could be on a beach. We've seen him kind of wandering around the wilds as well. And if you didn't catch the trailer this week, it's about 10 minutes long. I highly recommend it. It's even weirder than we thought.
Nice.
Yeah, something to look forward to. Mm-hmm. But the point of all of this, and I really do love talking about this stuff with you because it's fascinating. And again, if he gets excited about anything, or if you hear him excited about anything, call it out in the comments and stay away from that game in general. Is that a number of games came out this week that I really didn't know about. I knew about one maybe a week ago, and another one I didn't know about at all. And I've had a really great time with them. They're really interesting designs, and I've had a lot of fun with them. There's another game that you've been playing, Tom, that I want to hear about. That is, it's set in the Conan universe. Is that right?
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, that one came out of nowhere. I hadn't heard anything about it.
So what's that game called?
That is Conan Unconquered.
And that's a PC game?
Yes. It is. Do you want me to talk about it now?
No, what is it?
It's a real-time strategy game. They actually call it a survival strategy game. So anyone who played they are billions will kind of know the idea here. You're building a base and defending it against just hordes of enemies, trying to take it down. Set in the Conan universe.
Yeah, it's kind of top-down StarCraft, but with billions of enemies or thousands of enemies.
Yeah, it's like a isometric. There's 3D. It's 3D assets, and you're building up this base, and it's got like you're managing this little economy to primarily defend this base against rising waves of enemies. Very similar to They Are Billions.
Okay.
And it's made by Petroglyph.
Oh, I love them. That's a lot of former Westwood folks, right?
Yeah, former Command and Conquer devs. They did.
They did Empire at War, which
Empire at War, Universe at War, the 8-bit armies. I think was them.
Yep, they made some money doing those.
They do a lot of RTS. I mean, that's what they do.
Empire at War. If you are listening and you haven't played that game, it's an old Star Wars game. I think you can probably get it on Steam for some kind of some discount. Highly recommended. One of my favorite RTSs of all time. And Petroglyph, since the 8-bit Army series, has been given the reins for doing a remake of the original Command & Conquer series. So I'm really excited about whatever it is they're going to pop out with.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Yeah. But tell me about Conan Unconquered.
So, admittedly, I think I bought this yesterday. I actually bought Rick and I both a copy because Steam had a sale on the 2-pack.
Multiplayer.
You get 2 of them for, I think, 25% off. And it was one of the things that, like, all the reviews talk about. People are like, oh, I don't know if I don't like this, or is like, they are like, oh, if you are interested at all in something like They Are Billions with co-op, you should get this. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I bought the second copy and gave it to Rick, and I'm hopeful that at some time we'll play it. We used to play RTSs against each other all the time.
Oh.
And so it might be nice to do a co-op.
Yeah, co-op's going to be better. I am very thankful that you are willing to have me as your co-op partner, considering the number of times you beat me to a bloody pulp playing RTS games just in general. And that's really why we stopped, is that I couldn't put up a fight any longer.
Yeah, we should sell them that, either the Sins of a Solar Empire story. That was a good one. I tell people that one all the time. Or there was another one, Age of Empires 3. I remember you throwing something at me. Like we were both in the
so we're clear,
local area.
On my podcast, on my video, on my channel, you now want me to tell them a story about where I lost so badly I refused to play the game for a period of time?
I believe that period of time may be ever again.
So Sins of a Solar Empire is my favorite version of this, because Sins of a Solar Empire has essentially a random map feature. And the way that game works is it's in real time. You're taking control of these star systems, and they have pipelines, right? So you can have a strategic kind of bottleneck. And this particular map came up. It was just me against Tom. And essentially, the game accidentally gave me 2/3 of the universe with a bottleneck that I could control, and that Tom was stuck with very, very few resources, and I was in a massively advantaged position. And so there was really no way a normal person would lose this match. And of course, while I was controlling the bottleneck, Tom comes flying through with an inordinate amount of units and resources, and I'm sure he cheated in some fashion. But after he got done wiping me out with that board, I looked at it and said, I'm never, ever going to have a better chance than that. And if I can't even come close, I think we probably need to move on to a different game. And I'm not sure I turned that on since. Tom might be right there. But thank you for making me share that story, Tom. I really do appreciate it. I am questioning whether Two Hoegs are, in fact, better than one.
I don't think you set that story quite with enough dynamism and excitement. So I'm going to add a little bit to it.
Great.
So the particulars of this are, yes, Rick was in a massively advantageous position in that the way that the galaxy had generated, there was a giant. So if you've played Sins of the Solar Empire, there's neutral factions in the map, particularly pirates. And there was a giant, massive, the pirate base for the entire map was sitting on the bottleneck out of my starting area. I could not leave where I started without passing through the system that the pirates had their base in. And those things, the pirate base is not meant to be destroyed or even assaulted until mid to late game. So as we're playing, first of all, Rick is constantly paying the pirates to attack me.
I was.
Every cycle that they had of, hey, we're going to attack someone, I had a fleet of pirates coming and attacking me. Also, I couldn't leave because I couldn't get a colony ship past their base without it getting blown up. So two things happened, three things happened, I guess, that ultimately won me the day. One, Rick kept sending the pirates against my fleets, so I spent a lot of time fighting off pirates. And your ships in Sins of a Solar Empire get better the more experience that they earn. So my ships were very experienced. They had lots and lots and lots of pirates. Second, I was able to basically blockade run the pirate base with a huge fleet, kind of distracting them as my colony ships got past, and was able to form a colony outside of that bottleneck and sort of start building a secondary base, which Rick was unaware of and assumed did not exist, because how could I have possibly gotten out?
This is all true.
And then the third, okay, finally the pirate base gets taken down. I think I take it down because Rick's like, why would I do that? And so I'm already hurt a little bit. And so then Rick sort of sees the pirate base come down and swings in to finish me off, assuming that I'm, weakened. I don't have many resources. I don't have many ships. And I believe we had a fight where Rick had a much larger fleet, but it was around my planet. And I managed to basically outmaneuver him with my limited, though experienced forces, into getting hit by planetary defenses, generally knocking out flagships while he was kind of distracted with other pieces of the fight, whatever it would be. And then, yes, that was basically, I think that battle, I don't think we actually finished the match. That battle, Rick just shuts it down and says, if I can't win that, I'm never going to win ever. And I'm out.
Yeah, I'm going to edit all this out, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, posterity.
Nope, I can actually use the phrase "cool story, bro" completely literally here. So Conan Unconquered is a survival. They are billions type game. Conan is old school technology, right? Do I have to care about the Conan universe to enjoy this game?
So if you watch the trailer stuff on Steam, which is where I bought it, the developers clearly have a passion for the IP. I don't know anything about it other than the titular Conan.
Right. I know that's like barbarian, comic book covers type stuff.
Yeah. And if you've played either like Age of Conan or the survival one that I'm forgetting the name of, but there's a Conan like survival like Rust or Ark or any of that, where you like harvest resources and build up a town and stuff like that. In first person, like a survival crafter, I think is typically the term I use for it.
Okay.
Then kind of the pieces. There's magic. It's barbarians. There are these kind of god avatar things. And then there's a bunch of sort of mythical-ish creatures like huge scorpions and spiders and things like that. So that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see. So it's like a sort of barbarian fantasy, I guess, would be probably the most accurate depiction.
All right.
Like I said, I have no affection or real like knowledge of the IP. It doesn't seem like that's necessary. You just kind of a basic idea, but I think if you do, there's some fan service effectively there. Like there are characters that are in the books. They like the villain and also some of the heroes.
You say characters. Is there a campaign? Is there a story or no?
There is technically a campaign. I don't think there's much of a story to it. I've only played the first mission of it, but it's like a series of defends that are mostly, I think, tutorializing the kind of infinite mode where you're just trying to last as long as you possibly can.
Right. That's what I would have expected. Okay. Well, that sounds interesting. I certainly trust Petroglyph. I've enjoyed a lot of their games. Like I said, Empire at War, the probably not well-named Grey Goo, I also very much enjoyed. So I will check it out, and I will be interested in playing it with you. Certainly a co-op real-time strategy game is an interesting bird, and so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And again, it's one of those types of games that we didn't know about. The next game I wanted to talk about is a game that I knew about primarily from a week or two ago, and certainly you discussed it last week, and that's Outer Wilds, or The Outer Wilds, and I'm always going to confuse this with The Outer Worlds, and I don't remember which one has a "the."
Yeah, it's The Outer Worlds by Obsidian.
Yep.
And Outer Wilds by these people.
Yep. And you were excited about it. You knew it was coming out this week when we talked about it last week. Did you get a chance to play it much this week?
I played it right before this podcast.
Yep.
Like literally less than an hour ago. I had not had a chance to play it beforehand, actually. It only came out, I think, 2 days ago. and I hadn't had a lot of time to play. And then yesterday I ended up picking up Age of Conan, so that's what I played sort of on my lunch hour. Or not Age of Conan, that's the
Conan Unconquered, obviously.
Conan Unconquered. Age of Conan is the, I think, defunct at this point MMO in the same universe.
I don't know. That's Funcom, right? I never know what they're doing. But yeah, the Outer Wilds. So I have gotten a chance to play it. I've probably played it a couple hours at this point. It is that cool kind of indie type game that does something new and different that I haven't seen before. I would say that it's basically about exploration. It's first person. You're talking to various people. Nothing is voiced. It's all kind of text box based. And on the opening world, you're kind of learning how to maneuver your character and getting prepared to maneuver in 0G. And ultimately, you wind up getting a spacecraft, which I say spacecraft, but it's all wooden. It's a very particularized kind of let's say not terribly science fiction oriented space conceit. And so you get into this wooden craft and you can travel to various different worlds in this one solar system, and everything is spinning around and it's all very close together. So you can see everything from anywhere that you're basically standing. And it's all designed around this kind of exploration and puzzle element. And a lot of weird stuff happens. You can have gravity change sides. You can be sucked into a quantum moon. You can be transported by a black hole. And all things are happening within what I think is probably a 20-25 minute time loop, where after a certain amount of time that you've explored, you're essentially killed and knocked back to the beginning and have to go and do things again, but with whatever knowledge that you've gained as part of the process going forward. So it's kind of a Groundhog Day meets Kerbal Space Program meets the puzzles from Myst. And that's a really kind of clunky way of saying it feels different. It feels new. And the thing that I can say best about it is it really does feel like you land on a new planet and you don't know what's in store for you. You've got a planet that's hollow and has basically its cities in the middle of it and hanging down from the top. You've got other things that are just completely unexpected. And as an explorer type video gamer, somebody that really likes to see what's around the next corner, it is absolutely scratching that itch. The graphics aren't the best. It's an indie game style graphically. But they're certainly more than serviceable, and they can give you some of that wonder and awe when you do see the sun come up around a mountain and you're kind of bouncing around like an astronaut trying to figure out your way into an ancient temple. And so I highly recommend it. I really have enjoyed it. I believe it's available on Game Pass. If you're an Xbox Game Pass player, I think you can just play it for free. And it is a very interesting, very unusual thing. I think it's probably pretty hard. I've certainly come up against a couple things where I don't know exactly how to proceed. So it does give that kind of feeling of Myst. I'm using that as my reference point. Probably a lot of the folks that are watching this or listening to this are like, I'm sorry, what? Because I think that game came out, what, in the early 90s, Tom?
Oh, God. We played it on like a Apple.
Yeah, I mean, Myst is a classic, an absolute classic. And I can recommend... if you follow the Easy Allies, which Hoeglaw is a sponsor of, there was a Hall of Greats where they nominate games for inclusion in their essentially Hall of Greatness, where Ian Hink, who works for them, did a video that is a celebration of Myst. It's about 6 minutes long, and I think it's on their YouTube channel. I highly recommend checking it out. If I can remember to do so, I will link it in the description to this video. But it's a very old game. It was basically a bunch of photos that you moved around, and you pulled levers and you hit buttons and you tried to figure out what was going on to advance through this space. And this feels a lot like that to me. There isn't a heavy amount of narrative at any given location or space, but it's all these kinds of wow, this is a weird tower. How do I climb it? Oh, these crystals make me float. And now how do I figure out how to move these balls around in order to turn this lever the right way? Has that been your experience in your 20 minutes of playing it, Tom?
Yeah, I didn't get to play it much today. I got through the kind of opening, sort of walking around on the planet, the initial planet, meeting all the people, learning the basic rules of how to do. So, it's sort of a tutorial.
Yeah.
I got off the planet, launched my ship, landed on the moon because I was like, it's nearby. I think there's something to do there. I got out of my ship and I died because I forgot to put on my spacesuit.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. No, and yeah, you have to put on your spacesuit, Tom. Absolutely. You get a certain amount of fuel. You get a certain amount of oxygen. But again, in order to kind of give the flavor for this, it's called Outer Wilds. It's got a tree as the eye in Wilds. The opening music here, the music that plays while you go off into space is kind of banjo-y. It's twangy. it's very much like, what if we were exploring Oregon, only Oregon were a solar system? And that's really what it's kind of based around, and with all this kind of wacky stuff. Hey, we can mess with gravity and dimensions and things like that. I am very much looking forward to seeing what else is in there, because it seems like every single thing I do on any given loop of time is a new thing, something brand new to explore and to find. I will say there is, as best I can tell, one major negative for somebody that has kids or is a professional or an adult. And I don't think you can save the game. It appears that it saves automatically every time you loop through time. So you can kill yourself. You can smash into things or forget to go outside without a spacesuit and things like that in order to have the time loop reset, and then that counts as a save. But it's a little bit clunky, and certainly as a person who often needs to essentially drop the controller and go do something else, it's not my favorite design.
Yeah, it's, you can pause it, and I think that like stops time progressing. And I think when I got out, it looked like what the tooltip was when I left was basically reset the loop and exit. So I assume that means any progress that you achieved, like knowledge that you got, rumors that you uncovered, whatever, carry over.
Okay.
But yes, you always, like, if you want to play like you have to play a complete loop basically. Which is not super long. I think it's like 20 minutes, but still something, things come up, and it's a minor point, I suppose. Things come up. I think it's more that, like, gamers, and maybe us in particular, the idea of losing progress is so untenable or unacceptable that, like, that is a hard design thing to handle.
Yeah, no, I don't love it, but you're right. It's a minor point. And really, truthfully, the advancement in this game does appear to be knowledge. It all gets added to your computer log in your spaceship, and then that kind of keeps track of the mysteries you've found, what you've solved, how you understand what's happening in the solar system. And so I think that I think you're right that most of the advancement is probably locked into that information, but still, you're going to start in front of that campfire every time you turn on the game. And that can feel like a step backwards depending on the scenario that led you to quitting the game at that time. I do recommend checking it out more next week, Tom, because I think it's a really, really interesting game. And I think you'll find it interesting because it does do so much that doesn't really equate to anything else in the video game sphere that I can think of.
Yeah, I'm planning to check it out more this weekend, hopefully. I kind of forgot. I pre-ordered it because it was on sale. I bought it on Epic, and then it came out, but Epic, it doesn't, at least right now, give you a lot of notice that, like, something you've pre-ordered is now available.
It's just in your library, ready to go.
You just have to know. It's really weird too. Like, when you go to the store for that game, like, I went to the store first, and it's like, yep, you own this. There's no link from there to be like, okay, can I install it now? You have to go to your library and find it. Yeah. So the Epic Store still got a lot of work.
That it does.
Quality of life.
Well, and I imagine one of the reasons you forgot about it a little bit is that a different game that I had no idea was coming out this week, and I had no idea what it was, because a number of the reviews essentially started out by saying, this is a melange of different things, and we don't even know that you should necessarily read ahead too far so that you can discover it for yourself. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds exciting. And so I just dropped it and said, all right, I'll buy it. Is a game that came out this week called, and language apologies, it's in the title, Void Bastards. And Tom, did you get a chance to play that a little bit more than you played Outer Wilds?
I did. I played it for a few hours, couple hours.
Sure.
So Void Bastards was on my radar a little bit because someone at work just really liked the way that it looked, and so kind of shared it out with us on the chat. And I was looking at it, and
it looks really interesting. How would you describe how it looks, just graphically, while you're in the game?
Yeah, so I think the art style is amazing. It's probably my favorite part about it so far. I haven't gotten super far into anything else, so I can't really comment on that. But the art style is amazing. It's basically trying to be a 3D comic book. So the texture work is all kind of color form, but with hard edges. There's detail, but it's not trying to be photorealistic. The enemies are actually two-dimensional, but they move in 3D space, and they have 3D attacks. it's very hard to describe, but what it's trying to do, as far as I can tell, is be a motion comic that you can move around in.
Yeah, it gives off that feeling. It's got these hard kind of outlines to all the coloration, and it winds up looking to me very much like an old school kind of Silver Age type comic. And they go for that conceit entirely. Like when you're playing the game and it's a first person shooter when you're actually in the game, it's got a white border around it to kind of give it a look like it's a comic card. And it's really fascinating. The group that made this game, Blue Manchu, which I love is the name of a game developer, are former Irrational folks, and they had put together a game called Card Hunter, which I played a lot of. Did you ever play Card Hunter?
Oh yeah, I loved Card Hunter. I never ended up. I think I might have paid a little money into it, but not much. It was
it used a free-to-play model. Yeah,
it was a free-to-play model where you could. I think it had both a subscriber line and kind of like a currency line, so you could. I think it was pizza was the premium currency.
Yeah. The whole conceit. I loved this. So Card Hunter was set up. It was a kind of tactical strategy game. You had people on an isometric board, but the conceit was that you were getting told a Dungeons and Dragons expansion pack from I think it was your older brother or your cousin or something in a basement somewhere, and so you paid for pizza and things in order to keep the game going and enjoy it even more. And I loved that. But the reason I brought it up in connection with Void Bastards is it was clear that one of the things they were going for in that game was this creation that was completely evocative of a different type of game. Like when you got levels in Card Hunter, they appeared as like the packs, the dungeons for a Dungeons and Dragons expansion. And it all went into that conceit. And Void Bastards has exactly the same kind of feeling. Every time, and we're going to talk about the design a little bit because I'm going to let you talk about it because it's got so much going on, I'm not sure I can do it justice. But every time you get a new character, it comes up as essentially a series of comic book panels that you go through and you advance through. And even the menus in between missions are comic book panels. And then you go into the actual game and it's a comic book panel.
Right. It's funny. I was, I'm looking at, I think this is the right one. So also for anyone who didn't play, yes. Okay. So sorry, I found the article I was looking for. Card Hunter was on PC. I think it's actually played over the internet, and they re-released it. They ported it over to iOS under a different name by a different company. The iOS version is called Loot and Legends. For anyone who's not familiar with Card Hunter, that's the same game. That's just the ported version.
Okay.
No idea. I assume Card Hunter was too similar to something else on the App Store, and so a name change was required. But anyway, yeah, Card Hunter was great. I really enjoyed Card Hunter. I'm a strategy guy. I like the papercraft aesthetic. Again, just like something different and interesting that I think was also sort of really helpful for their production costs.
I think Void Bastards is phenomenal, but can you help us understand what it is even to play? What is this game?
Void Bastards. So let's see. It starts with an FTL kind of framework, which has become very popular in the sort of roguelike genre. You're moving between a set of nodes where each node is some sort of encounter.
Yeah, let's start there. It's a roguelite. I mean, it's the lightness is built into the thing. So it's a roguelite.
I don't use roguelite.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a silly distinction.
All right, I don't mean to be offensive.
No. Sorry, was that an aggressive response?
It's fine.
First of all, you've got roguelite and roguelike, literally two words that are one letter apart, mainly describing the same thing, with one exception. Roguelite generally means that there's some sort of progression that takes place between runs, between sessions, between characters. And roguelikes don't, because the original Rogue didn't do that. But I think that distinction is just like, that's like if a first-person shooter, like if it uses different weapons, we should call it a different name. Like that, or if it like, this is a first-person shooter, but this one has progression and this one has magic, so we're going to give them all different genre titles. It's like, no. The concept here is your character, you go on a run, you're expected to die, you're expected to do it repeatedly. And I think the roguelite genre is an evolution of what Rogue did in terms of taking all of that and putting it into a single arc, or like sort of one, like where you're actually progressing. One of my favorites of this genre is a game called Everspace. Everspace which is a like space sim almost. It's technically like a 6 Degree of Freedom shooter where you're in a spaceship. And the reason I like it so much is because your deaths, you're redoing the runs, actually makes sense. There's a narrative cause for it that's explained, and I think that's really cool. I think the way that they handled that is really cool. So it sort of makes sense why some things carry over, why you have knowledge of these other people, things like that.
Sure.
So anyway, it's a roguelike, which means that, as we were saying, you're intended to kind of keep going as far as you can, die, start over, and then your progress from the previous run kind of carries over in some capacity so that you can get further.
Right.
Whether that's legitimate, in this case, it's actual unlocking of features, equipment, things like that. Sometimes it's just pure skill and knowledge. You're not getting a lot between runs, but you now know how certain enemies have to be dealt with, which directions you should potentially go or not go. And in that way, you kind of get further and further. So that's the base. It's using an FTL model. So FTL is faster than light, but I think it just goes by FTL. It's kind of one of it's the progenitor of, I don't know, it's like, it is clearly a roguelike, but there have been a ton of games that have mimicked FTL in different ways. And so it almost feels like its own subgenre of like FTL likes.
With like the dotted paths between something trying to get to the end of a bar somewhere.
Yeah, specifically moving between these sort of like node graphs, different sectors, things like that. I mean, Everspace in particular is exactly the same. Number of different things.
Right, and in Void Bastards, you've got this network set up of, you're in the Bermuda Triangle of space. There's all these derelict spaceships, and you're going between them to try to get to a who's it or a what's it that has been required to advance the ball.
Right. So what I was going to say is, so in this case, each of the encounters, each of the nodes, primarily, there's some cases where this is not true, are derelict spacecraft, which you then explore. And you explore them by going into the sort of first-person shooter mode where you're wandering around basically trying to pick up stuff. Usually there's a major MacGuffin that you want to get, and then there's a bunch of like minor materials that you can get that can help you craft other things later.
Other MacGuffins, yes.
Primarily, most of the things you're trying to get are to unlock equipment. And then there's actual like storyline loot that you need in order to progress. I haven't gotten past the first storyline requirement, so I don't know where that goes after that. I don't know if that's the whole thing. I don't know if once you do that, there's like another thing.
That's only depth 1, dog.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I think it'd be odd if it wasn't. But so you go on these ships, and there's some combat. There's a lot of looting. There's some sneaking sometimes, depending on kind of how you're kitted out. And there's a certain enemy type when you first start out that's basically described as will murder you. So you're kind of generally trying to avoid those guys, at least initially.
The aptly named Screws.
Yes. The Screws. And so you're on these derelict ships. Each of the ships is kind of randomly generated with a certain sort of like special bits to it, like what kind of enemies are there, what kind of loot you expect to find. There's certain special features that ship types have, so there's certain ships that you need to go to for medical.
Yeah, I love that part. Certain of the ships are therapy ships, so they can change your traits, and we'll talk about traits in a second. Some of them are, as you said, they're essentially ambulances, so that you can go and that's where you go to heal. There's luxury ships if you're low on food because you're trying to keep up a certain amount of food and fuel to actually make the trip across the galaxy. It's got a lot of the cool stuff that I talked about last week for Days Gone, where you're looking for something specific, and so you try to look for something logical in universe that would have that specific something. I love that.
Yeah, so particularly the health ships are the ones that I noticed because that your health is persistent. So if you start getting low on health, you're not just getting it back. You have to go find an ambulance. Or if you're sitting on a lot of food, you can kind of hang out and eat for a while, and that restores like a little bit of your health. That's very similar to the Hand of Fate model, where each move kind of costs food, and that gives you a little bit of healing. And if you want, you can basically move nowhere and heal up a little bit.
Yeah, no, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's hard to actually talk about what it is because it is so much built on all these systems that kind of interact. And so you are finding these specific MacGuffins in these specific locations, and then that'll help you buy a better gun or a stronger gun, or it'll help you identify where different parts are, or it will keep your fuel low, and you're constantly getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it really is a roguelite, because when you start out, it's essentially, it feels impossible to really advance further than maybe a couple levels of ships, because you just don't have enough weaponry, you don't have enough bullets, you don't have enough health, whatever it is, to really advance very far. So you're constantly kind of slamming against this. And I really like the piece of art that is the title card, depending on what you're playing it on, where it essentially has this long line of characters going out with a gun to try to fight whatever aliens are on the various ships, but it's absolutely evocative of the fact it's going to take hundreds and hundreds of people. And the conceit for this game is that it's essentially I think it's a prison ship, and they dehydrate different people whenever the last one dies, and that the last one gets the equipment because their backpack brings the equipment back. But the really cool part, and this is directly from, in my opinion, Rogue Legacy, which is another kind of roguelike game, these characters have these different traits. And so the traits can directly impact how good they are at whatever it is you're trying to do with them. I had a guy that had could only see in black and white, which is a big impact when they basically show what's locked and unlocked by green and red. And so, yeah, that wound up being a big deal. And you can go and you can find a therapy ship to get rid of that trait or to add a super trait of some kind. And it's a lot of fun, and it's great for what I need to do sometimes, which is essentially pick up and play for 10 minutes. And you can just pop in and do that.
Right. So one of the major restrictions is you have an oxygen tank when you're on these derelict ships. I think it starts at basically 7 minutes. I don't know if you can expand that later. But and then you can also, some of the ships, not all of the ships, some of the ships will have O2 consoles, which you can use to kind of fill your oxygen back up. But they only have one tank's worth. So starting conditions, like longest you can be on a ship is 14 minutes. And the sort of more expected time you can be on a ship is 7 minutes. So that's pretty, doable.
Yeah, you're zipping in and out, and you feel good every time you get back to that airlock.
Yeah, I had a couple real close ones where it's just like, I'm out of bullets. Or my health is super. I have to get out of here. So I'm just like running, like dodging things to get to the airlock. And yeah, that definitely feels good.
Well, I love it. Is there anything else you want to say about this game at this point, Tom?
No, I'm less. We should probably talk about the fact also that it has like a very, it has a British, sense of humor. Like I described it to my friend as it feels like I'm playing Red Dwarf, but I think actually the more appropriate thing is it may feel like you're playing something close to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
It reminds me of Stanley Parable. I don't know whether it's the same voice actor or not, but the main piece of voice acting is kind of the robotic controller of the prison ship. And yes, I think if I hear line printer and ID card in that exact British mannerism another time, then it's going out the window. No, I really enjoy it. It's Hitchhiker's Guide is right. It's kind of got this feeling of you get to an administration ship and it's got paper everywhere, and it's clear like it's a galaxy-wide bureaucracy that you're dealing with. It's essentially set up as almost a comedy, even though you're constantly dying and getting beaten to death by these aliens. I don't know whether or not more plot will develop as you go further and further in the game, but it is set up with a kind of humorous approach. Every time you start up, you get rehydrated. It's a little packet that is the person that comes back, and then you go and you look at the equipment, and he'll have some snide comment about wiping the blood off, or the fact that the other clients are perfectly happy and don't worry about what happened to them.
Yes, clients. Is the term that they use for these prisoners that they rehydrate and then send out into the field.
No, it's a good point. It's an unusual tone, and I can imagine if it doesn't work for you, it might be a bit of a turnoff. But I think you could say the same about the graphics. It's an unusual style. I really love it, and I'm totally okay with the British comedy aspect of it. But I highly recommend checking it out. I think just like Outer Wilds, I think this is a Game Pass game as well. So, if you got one of those $1 for a month offers from Xbox, it might be the month to try it out, because these two games really are special and interesting more than anything else. Of course, we've got E3 coming up, which is going to be what we talk about a little bit further on in this episode. And so there's going to be other things, other shinies to distract you. But I really do think these games are special and interesting. The last thing I wanted to talk about on kind of the game, what are you playing side of things, is I picked up an Oculus Quest. And if you're not familiar with it, Tom, This is the next step in virtual reality. It is a completely wireless, anywhere, no external cameras needed, nothing magical anywhere else needed to just pick up a helmet, put it on, and you're in virtual reality. And it is phenomenal, in my opinion. It really is going to open up the doors to VR in a way that it hasn't been able to be experienced with needing a giant supercomputer, needing wires connected to your PlayStation, whatever it is. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I do. But basically, if you've got the helmet sitting on the counter, you can pick it up, put it on your face, and you essentially drag around a circle of the spaces that you can walk in, and then it keeps track of that. And you can just be in virtual reality in 10 seconds instead of 10 minutes. And that really is a game changer for me, and I've really, really enjoyed it. It's a little bit more expensive than a PlayStation VR, but I have heard that it's been selling out in various places, and I really do think from a business perspective, more than anything else, it is the stepping stone for kind of mass audience consumption. I think you're, again, like most things, one iteration away, so it can come back down to kind of mass pricing, but it is as magical as we imagine it to be. It's very close to a kind of Ready Player One or some of the other kinds of virtual reality setups where you just pop in the helmet and suddenly you're in a different place.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I didn't know anything about this, to be honest. I haven't been the largest proponent of VR in general. Like, I thought it's interesting, but I haven't seen anything that I'm like, this could not be done any other way, and this is amazing. I've seen like cool gimmicks, interesting bits. Obviously, like being in a cockpit in VR is just really sweet. Like that seems to be like, this makes the most sense with what we have right now, because it's very easy to be like, you can't move, but you can look around, and you are using controls because that's what you would expect. And so that seems to be the most immersive, most effective use of the technology so far.
So I got to fight Darth Vader.
I'm on the Oculus Quest page right now. I've seen Vader Immortal keep flashing by my screen. I think I'm curious about a lot of it. I don't know. I think for a long time at least, you're always going to struggle with hardware power here. Like how powerful can that headset be?
Right, yeah, and that's the thing. And you can look at it and you can see people complaining about it. It's not as powerful as a Vive or certainly the Valve Index or some other stuff that sound like random words that I'm combining because you don't follow VR very much. But it's basically a cell phone chip that is put under this helmet, but like a console. You know, you hear the phrase programmed to the metal all the time from like the development side of things, but like a console that you put under your TV, they do seem to be able to get a lot out of this specific chipset, because the Quest, unlike the Vive, unlike the Rift and other VR things, is its own thing. It's got its own store. All the games are built for that particular chipset, and I think you can get a lot more distance when you have that kind of setup than if you're trying to aim at, this is essentially a PC you put on your face.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I guess what I'd say is I expect, and this technology still hasn't borne fruit yet, which surprises me, or at least I haven't seen it, is that something like a VR in-home streaming setup will end up being the sort of king of the castle, because it combines both worlds. Where you're technically using your PC, but you don't have to be attached to it in any way. We just stream it through your home network, and it's so fast because it's local that there's no issue. Certainly, you'll never can get to the latency or speed of native, or at least maybe I'm wrong. Maybe at some point we'll get that so low that it doesn't matter.
When we're quantumly entangling atoms or whatever
when
it
it's
is.
just the atom in your computer is shaking and the atom in the VR is shaking, and it's happening simultaneously. There's literally no transition.
Yeah, there you
time. That's quantum entanglement, right? It's where
I don't know. I'm a lawyer, man.
I believe quantum entanglement is and I'm sure I can't wait for like someone who actually knows about this stuff to comment and be like, that's not how anything works.
If we have an actual physicist comment on this video and tell us what quantum entanglement is, it'll be a win.
But my basic understanding is it's like two particles that for some reason are linked. And so when you do something to one particle, the other particle kind of does it. So I think there was a quantum entanglement communicator in Mass Effect, and that was
In
sort
Mass
of
Effect. Yep.
sci-fi, way to communicate, in that if you can, as long as you can transmit zeros and ones basically through this particle by making it move up and down or whatever, you can transmit data instantaneously.
Sounds cool. And that's the future of VR, is Mass Effect technology, folks. You heard it here first.
Quantum entanglement VR coming to you.
You heard it here first. But no, in all honesty, maybe you're right. But this is, look, I understand. I bought it because I wanted it to support VR. I love VR. I've always dreamt of it when I was a kid. And I bought it because I thought it sounded cool. It is 3 notches cooler than I actually thought it would be, even when I purchased it. So maybe I just need to, next time you're around the house, put it on your head and you can see how freeing it is to have room scale VR. You can go in the garage and have it be the entire space and not need to worry about making sure you're in front of the PlayStation camera and not making sure the towers are set up correctly and whatever it is. It is massively, massively freeing. And I'm not saying the Quest is necessarily the step that makes it everybody got a VR helmet, but it's definitely the direction that the industry, the VR industry, needs to go. And it's massively exciting for a guy like me who loves virtual reality as a concept.
No, I think that's cool. It's definitely something I'd like to play with. I certainly have to figure out, how I can get a trial in there for without the $400, $500 asking price. Just be like, hey, is this a thing that I like? But I think, so the interesting thing there is we talk a lot about art style and fidelity and things like that, and how maybe the game industry needs to take a step back because, the cost of these games have gone up so much because you have to create 8 texture layers for each texture to get that photorealistic thing. But if there's anywhere I expect photorealism or would like it, it's VR. And it seems like that's going to be outside the realm of what a cell phone chip, even a very advanced one, as we go forward, can do.
Yeah, that's fair. There isn't a lot of photorealism in the VR games that I have played on the Quest, although certainly with the right artistic style, it can give you a strong sense of presence. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that photorealism is 100% necessary, but certainly we're talking about steps on the road to mass adoption. That first VR set that puts you literally in a place is going to be a massive thing.
Oh yeah, and I think, I think Unwired definitely for any of the direction of this technology is a thing that has to happen.
It's so cool.
I participated in. I did the Void. They've got kind of a few of these around the country. We went to one at downtown Disney. It was you got to play a little Star Wars adventure, and the way that's built, I think you have like a laptop or a 360 or something like strapped to you in a backpack, and then wired into the helmet. And so that way you're able to move around, and they actually have built out a whole thing where you kind of go into an elevator and they make the room rumble so it feels like you're in an elevator, and then you step out onto like this fiery planet and there's like a sulfur smell, and so it's built to be this sort of I don't know what you want to call it, extrasensory experience.
4D.
Yeah, it's 4D seemed wrong, but you know what, they want to have this like to really give you a sense of presence as much as they can.
There's a staffer with a bucket of water just throwing it at you for rain.
They lose a lot of headsets that way, but they're really dedicated to the immersion.
Well, you know me, I'm a huge proponent of it. I love VR. PlayStation released a big VR title for the first time in a little while this week. Called Blood and Truth, which is kind of a London heist game, which I haven't gotten a chance to try yet. I really do think the Oculus Quest is awesome, and it is the next step down the road to really VR being something super, super special, and I can't wait to see what comes next on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, obviously, I think that sort of the last generation of VR was a little premature. I don't think the technology was all the way there. But I think people were excited and also needed to kind of like make back some money on some investments. And I think that
now who's the business side of this?
I think it's part of the problem with having kind of run your own company for a little bit. Is you just like think about. I love making games, and I think about the art side, but also I'm like, how are we going to make money with this? Because I need to eat.
We gotta get that R&D ROI. Come on, people.
Well, it's funny actually. See, I like that because so someone once described to me, and I think it's totally valid, which is like video games are weird in terms of like standard economics, because they are almost entirely their expenditures are entirely research and development. The incremental cost of producing a video game, especially in our digital era, is almost zero. All of your costs are upfront trying to figure out what this thing is that you're producing, and then like getting it to ready, and then actual sort of what you'd think of as normal economics of production and distribution and sales is all much simpler.
Yeah, I mean, that's the entertainment industry on all fronts in the digital era. I mean, that's music, that's movies, to some extent that's books, that you can just get them out through an email blast, essentially.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's an interesting world we move into further on that kind of front. But I think VR is going to be a part of it, and I agree with you that they maybe were a little too early with the initial generation, but I think you got to start somewhere. And I'll finish this off by saying you can take Astrobot out of my cold, dead hands.
How is so I'm curious. I've worn a few different VR headsets. How is it in terms of like ergonomics, weight, things like that?
I would say it's not as comfortable as the PlayStation VR. I think they really nailed how that helmet sits on your face. Mm-hmm. And this one, the Oculus Quest, uses Velcro. And you can get it to a place where you're happy with, but it's a little bit more likely to pinch your cheeks, I think, than the PlayStation VR is. And you have to know what you're doing. It's not maybe explained too terribly well. You have to understand that when you're strapping something to the front of your face, you really want the overhead strap to come as low on your head as possible in order to kind of balance it. And I don't think that's entirely clear when you first knock it out of the box. So they have some things to improve there. But I have been able to get it to a place where it feels very comfortable. And in terms of image quality, yeah, it's a cell phone chip. No, it's not the Vive. It is still a better image than the PlayStation VR.
Oh, okay. You think it's a better image?
It is a better. No, it's a better image than the PlayStation VR, and it's significantly better tracking. It has specific controllers. Mm-hmm. It's not using a camera move setup. It feels a lot better than the PlayStation VR. I would say it's essentially the middle ground between the PlayStation VR and the high-end computer headsets. But it is a significant step up in my experience from just playing the PlayStation VR games. And I love those. Again, reminder, I adore my PlayStation VR, but this is a step up.
Okay, cool. So when are you buying me?
When am I buying you one?
Yeah, it's just like as part of this, it's research and development for the podcast.
I see.
You can write it off.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. You know what? I'll look at that. You've got some birthdays and some holidays coming up.
I do have a birthday coming up. That's true.
We'll take a look. I really do think it's great. And so if you're not my brother and you aren't hinting at just a birthday gift or something along those lines, I do recommend checking it out. I don't know whether there are any kind of demo kiosks anywhere, but I do think, like so much in VR, those would be helpful. Even for me, who's someone who has enjoyed VR now for years, I was kind of, this is cool, but I'm getting it because I want to support wireless and things like that, and it was significantly cooler than I thought, and I would have not had even the early trepidation had I known that going in. But, I can't tell you how to sell your product. That's up to you. All I can do is talk about it on my video series and say I really like it. So that's our video game segment for the episode. I think we actually wound up having a lot more fun and interesting kind of experiences than I would have anticipated when we set it up last week, and we were talking about the fact that we weren't really looking for anything in particular. Void Bastards in particular came out of nowhere for me, so I really enjoyed that. But that sets up what's coming next week, and that is E3. And if you're not familiar with the video game industry, I don't know why you're listening to this, but if you're not, the Electronic Entertainment Expo, E3, is the major conference in Los Angeles every June that talks about video games. And this particular E3 is going to be weird because Sony is not coming. Electronic Arts really isn't coming, although I want to talk to you about Electronic Arts in a little bit, Tom. Electronic Entertainment Expo has been something that has been in magazines, that has been talked about between you and me since we were little. And I haven't gone, but you have. Can you give us just a little bit of your personal experience? What is it like to be at E3 as a game developer?
That's interesting. So yes, my first year as sort of a professional game developer, I had an opportunity to go to E3, and it was cool. I mean, the spectacle of the whole thing is really even with all the videos and stuff now, so it's fun. Okay, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
You're allowed.
It's very busy. There's a lot of there were a lot of people there.
And you went before it was open to the public, right? Like, I've heard it's a lot busier now.
Well, I actually don't know. I can't remember. I think it might have been open to the public while I went.
Okay.
I think it was still developers got free access.
Okay.
I think it was open.
Okay.
I remember waiting in line to play. I think at the time it was Mag, for like 2 hours or something.
Sure.
I saw Claudia Black. That was interesting.
Claudia Black of Farscape fame and some other video game series.
In this case, she was there for Dragon Age stuff.
I was thinking Uncharted.
No, she was there for Dragon Age stuff because she
got
played
around.
Morgan.
She did.
And so I saw her. Rick hasn't expressed this, so I have to express it to the audience. He loves Claudia Black. And I was too shy to ask her for a photo and a signature and an autograph, but I wanted to so that I could send it to Rick, but I didn't. I don't know even if Rick knows that story. But
I did not know that story, and yes, although it's not really video game related, she was one of the main two leads in one of my favorite shows of all time, which is Farscape. And I would be willing to bet most of the people that watch this or listen to this haven't heard of it. It was a 4-year-long sci-fi channel show that was made in Australia, but I absolutely loved it. It's from the early 2000s, I think, and Claudia Black was on there along with Ben Browder, and then she became popular in video games, and she is in Uncharted, she is in Dragon Age, and so that's really cool. I actually had no idea that happened. See, this is why I should go to E3.
So yeah, I did. I also saw. I think while I was at 3, I saw. Does she still do video game stuff? The one who broadcast aside Adam Sessler on G4 back in the day.
Morgan Webb.
I saw Morgan Webb, which was also interesting because she had like a whole. And I saw Adam Sessler, but I didn't see him at E3. He was actually on site at Insomniac. Back when I worked there, and had it's so funny because they all have these cadre people that follow them around.
Entourage.
And it's just
they're video game superstar.
I know, right? But it's so funny. It's I guess I don't think about that. No insult to Adam Sessler or Morgan Webb or G4, which all seemed like relatively small things. But I just assumed that they were just kind of like normal people, not celebrities.
Well, when the Pope is in the Vatican, you know who it is really well, So, I mean, I think that's in your specific space in E3, you're absolutely that popular. But yeah, I think it certainly looks hectic. I think it's even worse now. And I think that there are more public tickets than there were even when you went. And there's been a lot of complaints about it. So I think E3 is in a period of transition themselves. I think you see from Sony putting out State of Play, certainly Nintendo doing their directs, that there is a pretty concerted consideration from the developers and the publishers about whether or not it's a good investment of time and money to go and do these massive undertakings in Los Angeles once a year, or whether they can get their message across, they can sell just as much product, they can do as much damage, just kind of making a video on YouTube, putting it up and dealing with it that way. So I think E3 is got to sell itself a little bit differently than it has in the past.
I think that's right. I think, like I said, from my experience, it was very, very busy. Very, if you don't like being in crowds of sweaty gamers, don't do it.
Okay, so it doesn't sound appealing to be amongst all those sweaty gamers.
And I don't mean that's no insult to sweaty gamers. I am occasionally a sweaty gamer. But it's just a lot of us packed into a single building. That's,
sure.
Not something I think any of us want. And the truth is, and most of my developer friends, just gamers who have gone to E3 basically have said, at this point, kind of actually get a better experience at home with all the videos and stuff. You certainly see more at home or more easily than when you're there. Obviously, you can't go on hands with anything, or hands-on with anything, so that's nice. That's a nice E3 thing, but those lines are insane for the most part, at least if it's anything that is sort of particularly high profile or interesting to people.
See, this is important information because otherwise I get too excited about wanting to be there. I like to know the negatives so that I can say, I I'm having more fun here in Michigan anyway. So I appreciate that.
No,
in terms of this year's show, is there anything that you're excited about seeing more of, or that you're anticipating? Again, with the caveat from the top of this video that maybe we don't want you to be anticipating something.
Yeah. So,
is there anything you're looking forward to?
As we talked about, I don't hype things. I guess kind of got interested in Anthem like 3 or 4 E3s ago, or whenever they announced it. So no, I don't know any of the things that are potentially coming out of E3. I know that people have been kind of pulling out of it, so it's going to be less and less relevant. I think the point that you made earlier about E3 needs to become something else, I think is totally valid. I think it probably needs to shift more to being just a straight up kind of game convention that's about gamers and developers and stuff all getting together to just like kind of share their enthusiasm for it.
So more like a Gamescom.
Yeah, I think that's going to end up being, I think, obviously E3 is not really an industry event anymore. There's still some pieces there, and I don't know all the stuff. Like, I know there's a lot of actual business dealing and stuff that happens at E3. And,
right. These are your opinions, not Activision's.
Well, yes, but also, I mean, like, I know, even at, like, I would go to GDC, like, I was involved in meetings where actual kind of deals were being done, or we were looking at something that someone wanted to get published or something like, so like this kind of, and I think that happens at E3 too. But I don't think, in terms of a press junket, I just don't think that it makes financial sense for even the biggest guys.
So we're not going to see people rappelling through the skylights as much anymore, or rolling a tank through the conference center?
Seems unlikely.
All right. Well, so maybe I missed the glory days of E3. That's all right. I think in terms of expectations, everybody is curious about what the next generation of consoles looks like. I think everybody expects them to launch in 2020.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I do think we're going to hear announcements about that, and I think people are interested, though my guess is it's just going to be like, here's the new hardware, it's stronger than the old hardware, it does this many teraflops, blah, 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 blah.
I don't know if you saw it or if you caught the episode of Virtual Legality, but Sony did wind up not leaking, but actually giving an interview in March.
To Wired, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we do have a few of the bits and pieces about the PlayStation 5, and they actually had a presentation showing how solid-state memory makes everything faster. So they've kind of been slow-rolling the PlayStation 5 information.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me. It's funny. I almost not describe myself as a console gamer much anymore. I play my PC primarily for a few different reasons.
Sure.
One, I happened to get a very powerful one a year or so ago as just sort of a birthday present / gift to myself thing. So it's basically the best system I have right now. So anything that's multi-plat, that's where I'm going to play it.
Sure.
And also it's like just a actual like personal story of in my house I have a little office, and that's where my computer is, so I can actually be in here and doing this stuff and not worrying about like if my kids are watching what games I'm playing, because a lot of them are not appropriate. Things like that, whereas my main console setup is more central right now, so my kids use it and they play things like knack and Lego games and stuff like that, but I don't really use it I don't use it personally. Also, I like to be around my wife even when we're doing different things.
Sure.
So in the office, up here in our room, we have a TV. She can be watching a show, which is kind of things she prefers to do, and I can be on my computer, and we're still within kind of earshot of each other, which I like. I mean, I'd prefer if I was even closer, but hasn't been a logistical way to make that work.
Sure. And I can understand that. You love PCs. You're not as excited about the console launches, but it's still a big deal for the industry.
Well, right. Well, so what I was going to say is, PCs have obviously a more fluid. They don't have like generations. They're just kind of like constantly improving. And really the consoles are just, I don't know what the right word is, like hallmarks in that.
Yeah. Frozen in time,
so
milestones. Yeah.
We grabbed, where PCs were at this point, and that's what we are. Now we do it here. And I think also you've seen, at least so far, this generation, and I assume this is going to be the way that we move forward, the architecture's kind of homogenizing a bit to be more like a computer. without like unique chipsets like Cell or stuff that makes multi-platform development much more challenging, and instead just kind of like all kind of converging on a common set. There's different graphics card manufacturers and chipsets and things like that, but they all work in very similar ways. And in that way, you can kind of deliver a consistent experience across platforms. And I think we're going to see that just continue to happen. So then it's basically like, well, they're just two different computers. I've got this computer, and then they've got some exclusivity, which is more annoying than anything else. Because it's like, well, I got to have a PlayStation if I want to play Days Gone or Uncharted. I got to have an Xbox if I want to play something that's only on Xbox. I don't have an obvious example right now.
Sure. No, I understand. Yeah, and that's why you like PC games, is because you don't have that kind of issue. But it is an interesting time. It's one of those transitional E3s, and so I think there will be some fun stuff. I think we'll see a little bit more of CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk game, and some other stuff. I think Square Enix has promised some new news on the Final Fantasy VII remake, which should don't laugh, which should come out in 2025 or so.
Yeah. I was looking at E3 pre-stuff, and someone was like, they announced the Final Fantasy VII remake like 4 years ago, and we have heard nothing since.
2015, I think, was the E3 of Dreams.
There you go.
Yeah, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be fun to watch. I love watching it every year. But it's probably going to be, at least by comparison to other couple years, a down-ish year. But there will still be fun stuff, and I am especially looking forward to the stuff that I don't even know that I don't know about, especially kind of smaller games that could be really fun to see, just like Outer Wilds and Void Bastards and some other stuff that always pops up at E3, and so I'm looking forward to it. The last thing I wanted to ask you about E3, I don't know if you caught the Virtual Legality episode I did on it, but Greg Miller of Kind of Funny Games and Andrea Rene of What's Good Games have been announced as hosting the Electronic Arts live stream stuff, because they're not doing a formal press conference. I don't know whether you have any feelings on this or not, and we can keep it short, especially if you don't. But do you have any kind of notions about the fact that influencers now, the people with the YouTube channels and the Twitch streams that ostensibly comment on the industry and talk about the games and whether they like them or whether they don't like them, things that are like what we're doing right now, are actually hosting and getting payroll from the content producers, the Electronic Artses of the world?
I did listen to your podcast on this,
Sure,
because I was not aware. I don't know the two people that well. Like I don't watch a lot of influencer videos, to be frank, or a lot of YouTube game videos. This probably goes back to the not hyping thing.
Yep.
I do think that there's a pretty clear potential conflict of interest. I don't think there's a question there whether the person can kind of find a way outside it or not. But actually, when I was listening to your podcast, I was thinking about Jeff Gerstmann and the whole Conan Lynch 2 fiasco at GameSpot. And I think it's basically the same thing, or could potentially be the same thing, where it's like, all right, this one, for anyone who doesn't know, and maybe there's, and Rick can probably correct it more because I bet he knows more about it than I do, is basically Conan Lynch 2 was heavily advertised on GameSpot. They spent a lot of money on GameSpot advertising. Jeff Gerstmann was an editor at the time and did the review of the game, didn't like it very much, gave it like a 6, I think. And GameSpot fired him. Whether or not it was related to that, not clear. I don't think that was like specifically in his termination, but
no, they're not dumb.
The writing on the wall, or the sort of rumors were that basically he was told to give it a better review because they were sponsoring it so heavily. He said no, and so they published his review as it was, and then they let him.
And then he formed Giant Bomb, and CBS bought him and GameSpot, and then rolled Giant Bomb into GameSpot, so he's back under the same umbrella.
Yeah, I forgot the end of that story. That's great. Anyway, I could easily see, this is so the podcast talks a lot about, like, you try to keep the editor and the advertiser separate. You don't have critics, with ads for movies and things like that.
Yeah, as best you can.
But I think the video game industry, and the birth of the internet era have really blurred that line a lot. Like a lot, where would you want to, advertise your video games in the internet other than where people are going to read about video games? Like, it seems like that's just like a no-brainer, but then suddenly you've got this problem of, all right, well, they're doing ad sell, they're paid by these advertisements for games that they're supposed to critically review. And so you've got a natural potential problem there. And I think, like I was saying with the GameSpot thing, I think we saw that come to a head once. I think it's probably come up, that we're not aware of many, many more times. And I think this is another potential case of that, where it's just like, if you think that your critical review of this thing somehow affects your ability to get work in the future, that's a consideration you have to make. And that's difficult, just in general. I think that you'd have to basically say, I don't even think you can. I think the podcast talked a lot about, you can identify that this was a thing, and maybe that's fine. Certainly it's covering some things, but I think the truth is, as soon as you have any potential gain from this relationship, you lose your objectivity. And
I think that's the real shame of it. And I put that in my comments to the video because some people asked me about it. Is I think, especially if you're a fan of Greg Miller and Andrea Rene, and I think they do a lot of good work and they bring a lot of good energy and positivity and excitement to the video game industry. The real thing that you lose is, even if you believe entirely that they can disclose properly and everything else, you're always going to have in the back of your head that you like listening to these people talk and get their honest opinion on these video games, and you just can't ever be 100% sure anymore. And that's kind of a loss, just kind of on a realistic level, that when they take these, when they have the possibility of taking these in the future, if they really hate Anthem, or if the Jedi Fallen Order really comes up short, are they going to go full blast on it? Probably not.
Yeah, it's hard to say, to be honest. And you're right. It's sort of like, once that's out there, it's kind of and about it, obviously. Like, there'll be plenty of people that don't know this, don't realize it. There's a question mark there. And that question mark's always going to be there, even if they're doing everything right, even if they're completely unbiased. Let's say that they're perfect. They're not affected by this at all. They're like, I don't care if I get that job again. I'm going to be doing, this is my job. This is what I care about, and I'm going to be 100% honest. How are you going to make sure that people feel that way?
You're not. You're spending some of that goodwill to take that check, and that can't really be gotten back. That's really what the purpose of disclosure is for, is to say, hey, I don't think I'm biased, but I could be, and so you deserve to know this information. And that's one of the reasons some people don't disclose when they should, is because they understand that's what is being conveyed, which is, I could potentially be biased, and people don't want other people to think that about themselves, and so you wind up in this situation. But I do think this is the future. I think Electronic Arts is really on the vanguard of what I call in those videos the age of the influencer, but they are so much more effective in terms of advertising spend than traditional media outlets that you're going to see this more and more. And it'll be interesting to follow, not just from a legality perspective, but whether or not ultimately this impacts the fan bases of the people positively or negatively, because they're certainly going to be in front of more people than they otherwise would be.
Right.
And it's going to be interesting. I don't love it, primarily because I really would like to just believe that whoever's talking is speaking entirely out of their own experience. But I think it's something that we're going to have to get used to, because it is going to be the future. So,
well, I think we're definitely, clearly we're in the age of the influencer. Influencers you're seeing so much more ad spend to go to getting an influencer to play your game and, put out information about it, Twitch it for a while, whatever it is. And I think that makes total sense with the landscape. Like, that is the writing on the wall. That's what's happening. That being said, I think this one, and I don't know what the rule is, or even the guideline, maybe, let's not say rule, like it's something that's not binding, but effectively is just like, you can't you can't hire a reviewer directly as a publisher for anything. You can't contract them for anything. Just like you would break their objectivity, and we won't allow it. Now, I don't know how that works. Certainly you say here, you're like, all right, let them do it, but they have to accept that they potentially are taking a loss there in terms of how people see them. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe that estimation, maybe EA's paying them dramatically more than they ever make on these, video blogs. And they're just like, we'll take a shot. and see how it goes. Maybe they're estimating and be like, yeah, we're probably going to lose some credibility or something, but we're probably going to gain 10 times as many fans because this is a huge opportunity to be seen. There's a lot of estimations that I assume that they're making. I don't know. Yes, I agree that generally I want a critic who, and this is all over. Like, this isn't just video game reviews. This is like a person who's going to give me feedback and advice on professional or personal matters. I want someone who's going to be completely honest, regardless of the fallout.
Yeah, well, if there's going to be a usefulness to having a conversation about, I said Jedi Fallen Order or Need for Speed or The Sims or whatever, when that happens in November, you want to believe that the conversation is exactly what the person thought about it. And I think you're right. I think they're making these evaluations. They're not dumb professionals. They're really good at what they do. They made the evaluation and said this is worth more than any kind of potential fallout from anybody that follows us. And I'm not sure that they're wrong. And I think if they make the right disclosures from a legality perspective, that's fine. But I don't know whether you can actually make enough disclosures for Electronic Arts. I mean, I don't know that there's an episode of any show that doesn't at least mention Electronic Arts once, because they are one of the biggest publishers in the video game industry. So I don't think you're just going to have your entire podcast or video series have a disclaimer for the entire time. But you could have something that goes in your bottom chyron that says, oh, by the way, I got paid by Electronic Arts this year. It's interesting, and I don't want to dwell on it too much. Because I don't want it to be overly negative. I think we do have to kind of learn how this works, how to accept it, how to make sure that people are still getting content that they want to consume. But it is, from my perspective, and I'm an older gamer in terms of the scope of gaming, it is a little bit disheartening to see folks that always jump on this notion that GameSpot or IGN is getting bribed by advertisers, and the influencers generally get a pass on that when they're way closer to the line than most of the legacy media.
Sure. Well, and I think the truth is, I guess what I am excited for is, like I said, I don't know these personalities that well, but presumably they're big gamers. They're passionate about the industry, passionate about games, and I'd love to see presenters at these press conferences or these, whatever it is, live stream, that is, that's them. That's their passion.
They'll be great.
They're passionate about this, as opposed to a talking head who's getting their paycheck and is good at speaking.
They will be great. I think that I don't want to underestimate that. Greg and Andrea are great at this, and they will be great.
So I think that's exciting. I think that's great. I don't know. It's a sticky issue. I don't know how you get around it, because it's like, I do want someone who's passionate about the games industry. Any personality who's going to be that is generally going to be someone who's involved with it somehow. So how do you avoid that conflict of interest? How do you manage that? And I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, unfortunately.
And I think that's probably where we have to leave it. And I think you're right. And it'll be interesting to see how they deal with it, both at E3 and in kind of the scenarios that develop on their own shows into the summer and fall. And I will watch them as often as I do, which is, every once in a while, and we'll see how it goes. But I think they are great personalities. I think they will do a good job with EA. Andrea Rene hosted EA's press conference last year, and so I think that they will do a bang-up job. It's just a matter of whether or not that's a good thing overall for the commentary on the industry.
For what it's worth, if this is trod ground a little bit for Andrea, did she see anything?
Well, I mean, I think I would be lying if I said I caught every episode of What's Good Games. I definitely caught the episode where they mentioned Hoeg Law, but, that's just me.
Sure.
But I did get some complaints on the comments to my video. I don't know how accurate they are or not, that complained about essentially Andrea being one of the people that was really pro-Anthem when it came out, when Anthem was going through all of its trials and tribulations with the critical class. Now, I don't think it's impossible for Andrea to actually be pro-Anthem. I think there's some good stuff there. So it's one of those, as you described it, it's a question mark, right? Why is she being positive when a lot of other people are not? Is it because it just really clicked with her? Is it because she got a paycheck last year and is going to get a paycheck this year? It makes it hard to really listen to that commentary, and that's sad because I think she really is passionate. I think she really does have good insights on the video game industry, and so I don't want to have that question mark in the back of my head, but that's a little selfish on my part because I don't want to take away anybody's livelihood. So, gosh, I don't know where it winds up, but it is going to be something that we're going to have to look at for the foreseeable future.
Yep. I mean, admittedly, I understand people's reactions, and it's very difficult to understand anyone being pro-Anthem. But It's very possible that she was, but it just, the optics are very hard to manage. I don't know what you do there.
And that's really, I think, all we have to say about E3. It's going to be an interesting one. That'll be basically starting next weekend and going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. A lot of cool information. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about on this episode, last week we did talk about series finales and your disheartening treatment of Game of Thrones. And I know you brought up Chuck, and I know that you really liked that a commentator specifically called out the fact that they agreed with you on Chuck. So I want to do another, what I'm calling the culture corner of THABTO. And talk about, in this particular case, what I've described as schlock that you love. And this last couple of days, I wound up on Vudu. They were having a sale on Jerry Bruckheimer, Michael Bay movies. And these are particularly from the 90s. And there was a specific movie that I wound up watching that is called Armageddon. It's Bruce Willis. It's Ben Affleck. It's Charlton Heston giving the intro. Giant asteroid set to hit Earth, oil drillers, great time was had by all. It is undeniably completely schlock. It is a disaster movie that is essentially just man against nature. It doesn't have Godzilla. It doesn't have volcanoes, really. It has a lot of perhaps ill-fitting humor, certainly a lot of humor that maybe wouldn't pass muster in the year 2019 if the movie were trying to be released today. And all of that being said, I absolutely adore it. I love that movie. It exactly hits me where I live. It's got a lot built into my own personal history. It was the movie that I went to on my very first date with my wife. And so all of that gets baked in, and I love it to death. But I can also say, okay, I totally understand why this has whatever it has, a 25% on Rotten Tomatoes. Is there any movie, video game, book, television series that you kind of know in the back of your head maybe isn't good, but you love it to death anyway?
I'm sure there is. So the definition of schlock is something that is like objectively bad or like not well received. Is that?
I actually think the definition of schlock is different. I just put it there in this kind of context to indicate that, which is it's probably not great. Totally understand why the world doesn't love it, but I do anyway.
Okay.
I can see you prepped for this segment very, very much.
The funny thing is, I saw it in the little like preview, and I was like, I don't know what this is, so we'll just get to it when we get to it. I saw that yours was Armageddon. I actually thought it was funny while I'm listening to you right now describing Armageddon, and I'm like, God, is that movie that old that we need to express exactly what happened to it, or what happened?
I try to give a little extra context. It's the late 90s.
Oh God,
it's 20 years old.
Yep.
Well, let me hit another one that I had in the back of my head to give you a little bit more time to think. There's a video game that was PlayStation 2 era, and it's called Headhunter. And in this game, you're basically a guy on a motorbike or a motorcycle.
That game, and it got torn up.
I love that game, and you explore a city, and you've got a conspiracy, and there's viruses, and there's all sorts of stuff that I really enjoyed. One of the things I really loved about that game, and this might be a little bit hard to imagine if you've only been gaming in the kind of 21st century, but it was one of the few games at the time that had a completely orchestral score. So it had these cool strings and horns, and it felt like you were in Terminator 2 or something along those lines throughout the entirety of the game. The plot line really worked for me. It was kind of silly, almost a Demolition Man type futuristic environment, constantly jumping in with newscasts and full motion video that was ridiculous. But I really, really loved it. And really, the entirety of the full motion video era is one that I really clicked with. And I think everybody basically hates them now. But I loved that kind of B-movie acting and green screen backgrounds. I loved Operation Jumpgate. I loved all of the stuff on the 3DO and the CDI. All of these things that I think don't work for people right now. I'm half inclined to have a video series on the channel that is just me playing old FMV games combined with maybe old lawyer games and things that used mystery and law combined, and just do kind of playthroughs of some of my favorite stuff from the 90s and maybe the early 2000s, although things start to get actually kind of not schlocky by the time you hit that era. But those are the kinds of things that I still love, even though I can look at them and say, yeah, this is kind of silly. This is kind of stupid. You know, you got Christopher Walken talking to Dennis Hopper on a blue screen or green screen of a cybernetic hellscape. And I say, yes, that's my jam, good sir. And I don't know that anybody else has ever said that in their life, but I really enjoyed those games. One of my favorites, which isn't schlocky in my opinion, but I think reasonable minds can differ, is a game called Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within, which is a full-motion video adventure game that features werewolves and explorations of Bavaria and various castles that I highly recommend. I'm sure you can get most of the things I've described on Good Old Games for a song. But these are the kinds of things I'm talking about, Tom. You have to hit me with one example before I can end the show.
I'm trying to. So it's funny, actually. I'm cheating. I'm using like my Steam library and it's like anything I can find to be like, okay, which of these do I play a lot of that say, you know, is terrible, you know, mostly negative reviews. Certainly I play a lot of stuff that comes out mixed. Like I actually really liked just recently, what was the name of it? The Spy strategy game by the people who made Hard West, Phantom Doctrine.
Sure.
I really liked Phantom Doctrine. I really liked Hard West, and people hated it, or it got really torn up, mostly because it looks like XCOM. In my opinion, this is another thing that happens a lot, where something looks like something else but doesn't play like something else. So this looks a lot like XCOM in a lot of the ways that it looks and sort of the way that it works. And it doesn't play like XCOM. Like the rules of how your guys shoot and when they're going to hit and when they're going to miss and all that is completely different.
As you said when we started this video, expectation informs a lot of how people feel about something.
So I think you look at that. Yeah, so people would play that and be like, "Ugh, this is like XCOM but terrible." It's like, I mean, I guess it is a very bad XCOM. You're right, because that is not the game that it is. So anyway, I really enjoyed that. Okay. Which I would put in the sort of like more schlocky category, or at least it's. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to call it that. Like I like it. It feels bad to me. So,
no, I don't necessarily agree with anything that is described as a guilty pleasure. You can just like it for reasons that you like it. I was just looking for something that most people think is terrible that you really like. Maybe you're a huge fan of the Twilight movies. It's okay if you don't want to share this with YouTube, Tom. I just didn't know if you had anything off the tip of your tongue.
I really enjoyed Spaz 2, which a lot of people did not. Oh, here's a good one. Okay. So I played a game. I watched videos of this game before I bought it. And the videos were all basically telling you how bad the game was. The game is called Immortal Unchained. It is a Dark Souls-like, or I guess Souls-like. Do we just use Souls now? Where it's in a far, far flung future, like think, Warhammer 40K future, where you are a resurrected immortal or whatever. I can't remember the exact story of your guy, but you have a Dark Souls sort of what's the right word? You're an open template for deciding how you want to build your character.
Sure.
And the game is specifically focused on gunplay. It's gunplay from a third-person perspective with kind of a Dark Souls mentality. So it's very technical. It's about a lot of timing and blocking, and so there's ways in which that doesn't quite work for people, I think. But I thought it was fascinating. I really enjoyed it. I didn't finish it, but I played it for a long time. One of the things I watched was like people are like, the level design's freaking terrible. I don't agree exactly. I think that it's not as polished as some of the more polished stuff where it's like really leading you down the right paths and showing you the ways that you need to go. You kind of have to bump into some walls here and there. And certainly that's not as polished, but I played it a lot. I really enjoyed it. And definitely it was, I think if I go look at it on Steam, let's see where it's ranking.
What was the exact name of this thing again?
Immortal Unchained.
All right.
Immortal Unchained is currently mixed. Yeah, I don't usually go below mixed.
You just like things that are unconquered, they're unchained. It's a whole thing with you.
But no, I thought that game was really actually cool. It was doing interesting stuff that was different, and I guess like as a developer and a person who does a lot of early access and things like that, I'm more okay with things being kind of clunky and unpolished. Like I'm just used to it.
Sure.
And I think for some people that's a real turnoff. In fact, when I play something that's like fully released and like really polished, I'm like, whoa, is this what games are supposed to feel like?
Yeah, yeah. I know the feeling. Well, all right. I think you made a good effort. I appreciate Immortal Unchained. That does sound like the right level of what I was trying to get at. Certainly, if you're watching this or you're listening to this, if you have something that you like that the world at large hates, tell us. Put it in the description or put it in the comments to this video because we love to have those conversations. And if there are some good options, we'll definitely talk about them at the top of the next one. Otherwise, I think we can call out my brother as being unwilling to maybe jump in entirely to the absolute garbage end of the spectrum, which is what I was trying to hit.
What? Okay, hold on. I want to know. I want to participate. I want to participate in this. I got to figure out what my true garbage joy is. I really like the movie Dodgeball.
Okay, Dodgeball, sure. You could pick up various things. I'm sure there's an Adam Sandler movie that's just execrable that you might otherwise like.
I love a lot of Adam Sandler movies.
There you
Big
go.
Daddy.
Sure.
I even like Mr. Deeds.
All right, now we're mining. This is good. No, but I also, I will let you think on it. Certainly, this is something that you can consider and bring up on the next episode. I think there's a lot of stuff, and the point of this was not to embarrass or humiliate or otherwise. I think there's a lot of stuff that you can like for any number of reasons. As I said with Armageddon, it's exactly my jam. It hit me when I met my wife. It was our first date. It has all this really cool kind of speechifying about, for all mankind and people coming together and saving the world. The fact that it is absolutely silly doesn't change the fact that I really, really love the movie, and I think that's okay. I think that's great. I feel totally comfortable loving the movie, but I know a lot of the world disagrees on that. But think about it.
I have one. I have one.
You have one already.
Yes,
okay.
It's funny. So I went to TV where I think more of my guilty pleasures live.
Okay.
And it's definitely accurate. I just have to remember what the name of it was.
All right. Why don't you describe this television show?
This is a reality show, which I generally don't watch at all. So it's already kind of like
Okay.
putting it somewhere there. And then this was a reality show I watched with my wife that we just sort of like
Sure.
loved to kind of tease it. Oh God, no, I know what it is. Oh my God.
Okay.
What is
All
it?
right.
It's
okay.
Okay, I'll have to find the name of this.
Okay.
Reality show, cosmetic surgery.
There's a cosmetic surgery show you love. I would not have guessed
It was
this.
a competition, so it was like a Survivor style reality show. Bridal plasty.
Okay. See, I wouldn't have guessed this. You've hit it. You know what? You have delivered what I asked.
It is complete schlock and was utterly hilarious and fascinating to watch the entire time. Basically,
Thank you,
got a bunch
Tom.
of would-be brides in a competition, or to-be brides, I guess, not would-be brides. Like they're engaged, they're going to be married, and they want to get plastic surgery before their weddings, and they're competing for plastic surgeries provided by this plastic surgeon who runs the show. They get these plastic surgeries during the show, so at one point a girl wins a nose job, so she comes back and she has a broken nose during the competition. It's hilarious and terrible, and if you want to make fun of reality TV, highly recommended.
All right. Thank you for participating, Tom. If you have your own schlock that you love, put it in the comments. We will talk about it. I love hearing about these things because you can like whatever you like, whether that's Armageddon or full motion video games from the 90s or apparently bridal plasty reality television shows. All right. And that's been the Culture Corner with the Two Hoegs. Otherwise, I think we're about ready to conclude this episode. Is there anything you're looking forward to, especially this coming week, Tom?
Anything? I don't think so. I think that's this one. I don't have any particular things I'm looking. I might get an Oculus Quest. I've been sitting on that website for way too long since we started talking about it. I'm like, this stuff looks amazing. Why do I not?
Two Hoegs is going to cost Tom money.
No, my wife will never forgive me. She'll be coming for you. She'll send you an invoice.
Oh, sure. Well, I highly recommend it. I tend to agree. I think it's the calm before the storm with E3 coming next week. We may wind up going out and seeing Aladdin, which a lot of people close to my circle have suggested is actually pretty good, marketing notwithstanding, and maybe seeing some other stuff as well. I'm certainly interested in getting out there. It's June. It's time for some summer blockbusters, and I look forward to those as well. Otherwise, I think it's the little stuff that comes up. It's Outer Wilds, it's Void Bastards, that is going to keep us going, and it's certainly going to be exciting. And I think that does it for our episode. If you watch this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. If you caught this on a podcast, thank you so much for listening. Please do review it on that service. Share it around. We're having a lot of fun doing this. We're very glad to see it really being enjoyed by frankly, more people than we thought would enjoy it just based on the pilot episode. So please do tell your friends. We are having a lot of fun having these conversations. And if there's anything you want us to hit, we've got the law, we've got the business, we've got game design on this podcast, on this video. Let us know that as well. We're always looking for good ideas. Otherwise, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. I very much appreciate it. I think Two Hoegs are better than one is a lot of fun. And I look forward to doing it again with you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.